In this lesson, we're going to be covering API usage. We're also going to be covering a little bit of HTML and CSS. So if you're looking to generate something that looks just like this, where we're pulling from a Rick and Morty API, then this video is going to be for you, because we're going to take the example of we're getting back data from an API, from a website, and we're going to create each one of these individually. Notice I don't have any kind of assets over here where it's given me a photo, it's given me the information of their name as well as their status of whether they are alive or dead. And of course, you can always add more things to this as well, and that's going to be part of a challenge for you, but we're going to get you started in the right direction. So if that's something that interests you, then keep on watching. That's what we're going to do. So before we go any further in recreating all this, I just wanted to point out a few things on here. And if we were to take a look at this right here, this Rick Sanchez, this right here is going to be what we call is a card. All right, we're going to break this thing down into divisions here. And in that card, we're going to have the photo on the left, so that's going to be a division. And then we have the information on the right-hand side. That's going to be like another division. And that's going to be how we're going to break this down. Now, I always suggest people, students learning this, is when you have an API that has a bunch of things that you want to display, just get one of them correct, and then the rest will follow suit. If I can go in there to the HTML file and just provide real quick dummy data, then I'm going to do one card, and if I can get it right, then I can copy it, I can loop it, I can create that card over and over again utilizing a loop. That's what we're going to do. We're going to start very fresh, and we're just going to grab some information that we're getting from the API and place it in our HTML hard-coded. That way we can utilize our JavaScript to loop through something that we know works. So we're not doing everything in JavaScript right now. Let's get a working example in HTML to get this to work. One of the things that we need to take a look at before we start with the HTML is, of course, the documentation. That way we know when we conduct this fetch, what kind of information are we wanting? How are we going to get it? What's it going to look like? And when I come down to this page here, the Rick and Morty API.com, the documentation, I'll notice here that we have the character, and the character schema is as following. We're going to get a name, and then we're also going to be able to get an image, which is nice. And so let's take a look at it. And this is an image that we can actually go visit. If we copy that to our clipboard and put that into our tab here, we should see a nice little image. Okay, so we're going to utilize this as like a starting point, a base for us to just get one card looking right, and then we can move on to the JavaScript. So let's go ahead and go with our file setup so you can see how this will work for you. All right, so as far as starter files goes, I have an index.html, an index.js, index.css. I have the standard boilerplate here, and the only thing that I really added besides the title is linking the style sheets. And the thing that I always like to do whenever it comes to the style sheets, just make sure that things work, because there's nothing harder on you is if you are trying to put some CSS in there and you don't see any kind of change. It's usually because it's not linked or named properly. So we're going to take a look at this, make sure that our CSS is linked. I gave the body with a background of red, and let's take a look to make sure that it is properly linked. It is, and that is perfect. Now it's time to change it to a color that we want. And for this demo, we're going to change it to the hashtag here of the 3 E's. So hashtag EEE, and that will give us a nice little slate gray, and we can take a look at that on our browser. Okay, now I am utilizing an extension here to look at this. You can either use Live Server, which is great. I have videos that have gone over that. I'm also now trying to use this in VS Code browser with the show preview. So that's another extension that I'm using in order to get this to view. All right, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and slice this up, and I'm going to have a grid style layout with this. That's what I eventually want to have And so I'm going to create a container for that. And so in the body, I'm just going to hit the period and type in Morty container. And that is going to give me a class that I can identify with later. And then each Morty character, I'm going to give them their own card. And so for this, I'm going to call this one Morty card for the class. So I'm going to hit the enter key and do another dot, and it's going to be Morty-card. Okay. Now inside the card, I do need to have an image on the left-hand side and then its information on the right. And so I'm going to create a div for it. I'm going to say div dot, and this one's going to be Morty image. And then I'm going to hit the tab, and then I'm going to hit the enter key here. I'm done with that div for right now, and I'm going to put in the information that I would like to have. And this example here, I'm going to do a div with the class of Morty information. Morty, okay. And then I can put a few things in here. Let's go ahead and do woman Rick. So we'll do an H2, and we'll do woman Rick. And then we'll come in here, and we're just going to do an H5 and call it alive, and that they are an alien. Okay. Again, we can play around with this information. I just want to get a couple things up. I'm going to go ahead and save that for now, and let's take a look at what we have. All right, nothing too special. Now it's going to be time to add some classes, and let's actually go back into the index.html and add the image. All right, so the image that we're going to want to get, I know that number one is Rick. We're going to go ahead and change this here to a 381 to go ahead and grab that character because that's who is represented on our form here. All right, so once I have that URL, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our code, and let's take a look at it. So in the code, in the Morty image, let's go ahead and add an image tag. The source is going to be what we just copied from the browser. And now we should be good to go in our preview. So there we go. All right, time to add some styling. Now that we have a single card in our HTML, let's make this look a little better. So let's go ahead and tackle these in order here. So the Morty container, that's going to be a container for all of the cards. And we're going to want to have a grid layout on this. Okay, so the grid layout is going to go as following. We're going to go ahead and make sure that Morty container is of type display grid. Okay, next is we want to define our grid template columns. So we're going to let the browser help us out with that. We're going to go ahead and repeat this with a maximum width here of 300 pixels. And we're just going to do one fractal every single time. Okay, so that's going to be our grid template column for this. Next is our Morty card. Now we're going to do a grid within a grid. We want to get the image on the left-hand side, the text on the right-hand side. And so we're going to accomplish this with another grid. Of course, we could have gone with display flex, but really wanted to focus on grid with this lesson. So we're going to go ahead and do a display grid. Next, we need to define the grid. And this is where we're going to do a 1.5 on the left and 2 on the right, meaning that the image is going to get a little bit less compared to the right-hand side. Next, we're just going to make sure that our background on here is white. We can see this happening here. And don't worry, we're going to fix this image coming up because it's annoying me as well. But we're going to give a nice little border radius to this. As you can see, we have nice soft round edges now. And then we want to give a little bit of a shadow for some depth. And then we want to apply a margin here. And then we're going to add a little bit of a transition for a refresh. Okay. Next is the Morty image itself. Let's go ahead and make this fit in here. So we're going to do object fit cover. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to give it the full width and height of the parent without going over. And so we're going to do width 100, and then we can do the height 100 as well, just to give it a nice stretch. And then we're going to give it a little bit of a border radius on the top left as well as the bottom left. And so in order for us to do that, we're going to say border radius, and then we're going to do the top left. That's 10 pixels. We want 0 on the right, 0 on the right bottom, and then on the left bottom, we want 10 pixels. So that's what's going to give us that effect. And then the text on here, we're going to adjust that with some padding on the next part here that we need to attack, which is the Morty information. Okay. So now with the Morty information here, we're just going to add a little bit of padding, and we'll make that 20 pixels. All right. And we're basically done with the CSS work, believe it or not. So we have a fully functional card as an example, and then now it's going to be JavaScript's turn in order to duplicate a card every single time we get a new character. It's going to create this in the HTML. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to it. Okay, so what I have to do next is in the HTML file, I'm going to go ahead and scroll all the way down here to the bottom right before the end of the body. And I need to let the HTML file know that we have a JavaScript file. And for that, I'm just going to link it here, SCR, and pull this in here. And it's going to be index.s. They're all co-located. And then what I typically do here is I will just do a real quick console log, and just to make sure that it works, is showing up. And I do see that here. All right. So once you have that connected, then we're able to go ahead and play around with it. Again, these are the dev tools. In this, I'm just going in here and opening the dev tools. If you're using a real browser, you can right click and use your inspect if you're on Chrome. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and I want to create an asynchronous function. So that way we're able to fetch the data that we need and process the data and display the data in these cards. Okay. And so I'm just going to create a simple function here. Just going to call it start. So we're going to do async and then start. And it's not going to take any kind of parameters whatsoever. I want to get rid of the dev tools until we actually need them. And inside of the async function here, I'm going to add a few comments just to help us stay on track with everything. And the goal of this function is going to be to display the Rick and Morty characters once we have them. So the first thing that I would like to do with this is, hey, let's go ahead and fetch some Morty characters. And for this, I'm going to create another function for us to use. And that way we're keeping things a little separate. And I'm just going to put this function right above it. It doesn't matter where it goes because they can be called anywhere. But we'll do another asynchronous one. And we're going to call it get Morty character. And we'll go ahead and do a left and right parentheses on there and then open up the curly brackets. Inside here, the goal of this one is it will return something, but we need to actually go out there and fetch from the Rick and Morty API. And then once we have all the characters, I only want to return the characters only. And so that's going to be the specialty of this function, is it returns all of the characters. Now let's go to the Rick and Morty documentation and grab the URL that we actually need. So in the Rick and Morty URL from the documentation of what we need, it's this one right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that one, and I'm going to store it into a variable. So let's go ahead and go back to Visual Studio Code. So in Visual Studio Code, I'm just going to create a variable here just for the URL. I'm just going to do const API URL equals, and we're going to put in there in the quotes what we copied from the documentation. Okay, so I'm not typing that in, I'm just copying it. Okay. Next is we need to create a variable for the response call. Okay, so I'll put this in some notes here for us. So we want to create a variable for the response in the API call. And then after that, we want to extract the data that we get from this. So those are the two things that we would like to do with it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable here. So we're going to do const response, and we want to set that equal to a fetch. Now, a fetch is a promise, and it doesn't happen instantaneously. So we are going to await it. And what do we want to fetch? This gets a URL as far as its first parameter or argument that it needs. And we have assigned that on line 4, and that's going to be the API URL. So now that we have this from the fetch and it will resolve, the next thing that we would like to do is we need to extract the response's body that it comes back with. So if you can think of it as there's a JSON object that is coming back from this fetch, and we need to utilize the JSON method in order to parse the body. So we're going to come down here, we're going to do const data equals, and then again, this is a promise as well. And so we're going to await it also, but it's going to be response JSON with a left and right parenthesis. This is going to be real common for us to see, especially if you're following along with a lot of our videos that we do. It's always going to be like response and data, okay, coming back from an API fetch where we have a JSON body. We're going to go ahead and utilize the .json on there. And at this point here, I would go ahead and just console log the data just to make sure that we do in fact get it. And that brings me to the next part, which is down here in our start function. Let's go ahead and create a variable to store this, even though it's not returning anything quite yet. But we'll go ahead and create it. And we're just going to do const characters because we know that's eventually what we want to have. And we're going to call this function, okay? And we're awaiting for it to return something back. But because we're console logging this right here, we're going to see it in our terminal that we have in our DevTools. And the last part here that we need to do is we're going to go ahead and call that start function down here on my line. Once I save it, it might move up. So there it is. It goes up to 19. And then I'm going to go into my DevTools and take a look at this. So I'm going to go ahead and do a real quick refresh. And here it is. There's the console log of it. And I get an array. Hopefully you can see that, an array. And it has info, which is information about the response that we got back. And then we also have the results. And this, to me, seems to have all of the characters in it. And something that I typically like doing with the live class is asking the class, hey, if this is data, how can I step into it in order to just get the results? And things that we take a look at are, hey, this is a curly bracket, right? Which means it's an object. So I can use dot notation in order to move in a level, right? I don't want data.info. That doesn't give me any of the characters. But if I do data.results, that gives me the array of characters. And that's what I really want. So if I can come in here and just do a console log of data.results, and let me go ahead and clear it and refresh the browser just so we can have a clear console here. Notice that no longer do I have what we were looking at previously, which is the info. It's all gone, and I have simply characters. So this is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I need. And once we console logged the results that we want, that's when I tell the class, hey, for this, now it's okay to return the data.results. All right. And that will bring us back down to here, this async start, which now the characters will be in our function, which is really cool because we use this function to give us all the characters, and now we're storing it in memory here in a variable called characters. What we're going to do next is, now that we have the characters, now it's time to start displaying them on the page. But before we do that, we do have to do a few things of cleanup before we're able to do that. So that's what we're going to work on next. Okay, so here comes the fun part. This is the part that we actually get to see things happening on the web browser, but we have to go fishing for some of these elements, and that's what I typically call when we're trying to use some sort of query selector or get element by ID, those types of things in order to go out there on the web page, grab what we want, and try to manipulate it with the DOM. So again, this part's super duper fun to see and to talk about as we're going through it. And so again, I'm going to put in some comments in here for notes. And again, that's for your benefit to know the thought process of going through this and displaying things. The first thing that we want to do is we need to go out there, and this is where I say go fishing, right? We need to go fishing and find the parent element container, okay? And what does that mean? That means, hey, I know that all these Morty cards are being contained by something, because that's what I want to inject all of these cards into. And if we take a look at our index.html, the parent container that I'm referring to is this one right here, okay? I want to go out there, go fishing for it, go grab it. And so that way I basically want to delete all the inner HTML that's inside here. So that way I am given a blank slate, which is my end goal. So I'm going to go ahead and find the parent element. I'm going to store this in a variable because I'm going to be utilizing it later on. And also when we're doing this in code, it spells out exactly what we're trying to do, what we're trying to go fishing for. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a variable here. I'm going to call it character container. And then I'm going to utilize document query selector. And I want to search and find the Morty container. That's what I'm going out there and finding. Now, I only have one of these, right? And it is a class, okay? And so classes have periods, and that's why in the query selector that you see right here, that is why I'm utilizing a period here, and then I'm calling it by name here. Okay, so those are the two things that need to be spelled properly in order for this to work. And then the next thing is I would like to clear out this parent container and just replace the inner HTML of it. Step 3 here, clear the parent container out, and that way we can start building things in there. And the easiest way to do this is if I just simply do the following. I'm going to go ahead and do character container. So over here, character container, and we want to replace the inner HTML, and we want to set that to an empty blank. And notice like right away, it's all gone. Even though it's still right here on the HTML page, it's still there. However, utilizing the JavaScript, we're able to simply clear it out. And how cool is that, right? We got to see something visually happen, and it's outside of the console log. And so this is where the real excitement comes from, all right? So next, we're going to take our list of characters, and we're going to loop through each one of them individually, pulling out what we want to display in there. So that's going to be the next cool thing to see all play out here for us. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and at this point here, let's go ahead and add one more piece of instruction or a little bit of notes for us. So on what we want to do next. So part 4 is we're going to loop through each of the characters, and we're going to create a card for each of those characters that we're looping through, okay? And so keep in mind that we have stored all of the characters from our fetch in this variable on my line 17, and that is what we're going to loop through. Remember, it is an array. We can loop through arrays. And remember, whenever we're utilizing a for each, we want to have a function inside of this. Okay, so this is the callback function. I'm going to go ahead and close this off here. And inside here, we're going to be looping through all of the characters. We're just calling it character. So if I were to simply just do a console log of character just to see what that looks like, let's go ahead and open up these dev tools again. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And notice that I'm scrolling over here. We get the individual object. The very first one here is Rick Sanchez. Okay. It has an ID. It has a name. It has the species, right? And so those are just some of the things that we're going to try to inject and build in here. Notice that we have access to an image. So if I wanted to simply console log their names, for example, I can come in here and just do character.name. And now I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and we should just get a bunch of their names. Okay, if I wanted the image, it would be image. And let me go ahead and stop this and refresh. And maybe it's not called image. Let's double check. And it's called image. So character.image should pull up here. And oh, it is showing up. So it is showing up right here. These are the image URLs that were showing up there. So again, we can get attached to anything in here. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the console log. And just remember, anything that we want to grab a hold of is going to be called character, and then we can utilize dot notation in order to access the rest of them here. Right. So again, if I wanted the gender, it would be character.gender, character.image, character.name, and so on. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so inside of the for each, we're going to follow this simple recipe in order for creating an element and then adding things to it. So the first thing that we want to do is, what do we want to create? The next is, what kind of class name needs to be applied to this element? And then what parent element does this need to be appended to? And how I'm going to go about this is over on the index page here. If I go ahead and collapse it, the very first thing in the Morty container is a Morty card. Okay, so I want to create a Morty card, and then I'm going to put stuff inside of it. Okay, but I'm just going to follow these 3 steps and build things out on it. So if we look at Morty card, what kind of element is it? It is a div, right? So that's what we're going to do first. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable. I'm going to call it Morty card. So I'm going to come here, give myself some space. And again, I'm just going to follow this recipe throughout this entire process. So this is going to be the Morty card. What class does it need to have? Let's take a look. The Morty card should have the class of Morty-card. So in order to add that class to this element that we're trying to create, all we have to do is call it out, mortycard.classList, and then .add. We are adding the MortyCard class to the element that we're creating. Part 3 in here, it says, what parent element does it need to be appended to? Who is the parent of MortyCard? Let's look at this. The parent is Morty container. Did we already create one for Morty container? We did. We called it a character container, right? So we already identified it. So we're just going to go ahead and anchor it to it or append it. All right, so now we're going to move on to the inner of the Morty card. Let's see what's next on what we have to build. And so this is where I see right here, we have a div right here of Morty image, and then we also have another inside of the card called the Morty information. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on the image one, and then we'll move on to the other one. And again, what we're trying to reference here, we're just following this recipe. What do we want to create? Okay. And I'm going to call this one Morty image div. And what type of element do we want to create? This is also a div. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of space. And what kind of class do we need? Right? And so we take a look and it says Morty img. So let's go ahead and create this one here. So we're going to add that class list of Morty-img. And then the last part here, number 3, which is what is the parent element that it needs to append to. So if we look at this, who's the parent? It's not Morty container, it's Morty card. Do we already have a reference point of Morty card? We do. It's right up here. We created it on my line 29, right? We're just going to append it. So I'm going to go ahead and type out the following. So the Morty card dot append child. What do we want to append? We want to append the thing that we just created. Next, inside of the Morty image, we actually have an image tag. Okay. So again, we're just going to follow that recipe. What do we want to create? What kind of tag is that? it's an img tag. So it's not a div anymore. It's an img. So give myself some room for the next one. And this is what we're going to do. What class name needs to be applied? Well, I don't see a class name, so we can omit that one. But there is a property that we need to assign to it, or an attribute, and it's the src. What would we like to put in there? Remember, we were doing a few things with console logging earlier in this loop. Again, we're still inside the loop, still inside the for each, and we needed the character.image. And so we can come in here and say, hey, you know what? The Morty image.src, okay, src, that's where we got that from, equals the character.image. Where are we getting that from? That's what we're looping through. We're looping through all of the characters. At this point, we should be able to see, once we append this Morty image to the parent, who owns the image? Who's the next parent in line? Well, it's not Morty card, it's inside of Morty image. Okay, so hopefully you can see that the Morty image contains this child called image. And so we're just going to come in here and append it. We want to append this to the Morty image div. So Morty image div dot append child. And then what do we want to put in there? We want to put in the Morty image. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to see the pattern here of creating something in memory, adding a class to it, and then going ahead and appending it. Okay, so let's take a look, see what we got. Already it's starting to look really good. Notice that we didn't have to really do anything for these images. They're already being placed in there, and that's because we had a really good reference source on our index.html when we built this out at the very beginning. Again, all we're doing is we're creating this and utilizing the DOM to build it for us. All right, let's move on to the next part, which is filling in the right side with some information that we get from that API fetch. All right, so let's go to our HTML and see what we have to do next. And the next one that we want to handle, we already handled the Morty image and the image that goes inside there. Now it's time to attack this div element, which is Morty information. So just like the image one, it was the Morty image and it had an actual image tag inside there. So again, just following the pattern, we're going to figure out what element do we want to create, and then we want to add some class name to it, classes to it, and then we can also append it to the proper parent. Okay, so let's go over it. I'm going to create a variable here called Morty info, and it is going to be responsible for creating the div for this, right? And then we want to add the class name. So the class name that we gave it over here was Morty information. So I'm going to do the same thing. So mortyinfo.classlist.add, and then we want to go ahead and type in Morty hyphen, and then information. And then who is the parent of this one, right? If we take a look at this div here, what parent is responsible for it? Which one do we need to tie it to? And this one's going to be the Morty card, right? Because if I collapse the Morty card, it goes away. Okay, it's the nearest parent. It's the nearest relative. And so we're going to do Morty card, append child, and then we want to put in the Morty info that we just got done creating. And next, inside of it, so if we open it up, we have an H2 and an H5. Again, we'll just do something like this. We'll do the Morty name. That's going to be something like this. So I'll do const Morty name equals document create element. And then we want to do the H2. And inside this, we want to actually display something. And we don't want to replace the inner HTML of it. Instead, we're going to simply apply the text content. So in each one of these elements here, we have the property of text content. And so we can do Morty name.text content equals character.name. And again, that's because we're inside of this loop, right? And I'm going to go over here to the pictures now that we already know what we wanted to create. And that way we can see it being built out live here for us. And the very last thing that we need to do is who's the parent of the Morty name. We just got done creating it right here. It's the Morty info. So it's going to be Morty info dot append child, and then we're going to supply the Morty name. And already you can see that we got the name tag on there. Really nice. And then the last thing that I had on my lesson plan here is let's go ahead and get the status, right? The status of it. And let's go ahead and do a Morty status. We're going to create that. That's going to be an H5. And we're simply going to use this as our pattern. It doesn't get a class name or anything, but we can update the text content. And that comes from the character.status. Okay. And then the last thing here is the appended child. Who is the parent? Again, we're still inside the Morty info, and that's where we're going to go ahead and put that in there. So Morty info.append child, and then you got the Morty status. Okay. And this kind of builds out your grid, right? Go ahead and take a look at your browser. And of course, as you expand this due to the grid layout, it will go ahead and expand with your browser as well. All right. So we did a lot of work. Hopefully you followed along. You understood the process on how we can create each one of these. And of course, there's multiple ways to go about it, but I really wanted this video to focus on creating elements, adding class lists, as well as append child. Other ways to do this, definitely, this might not be the easiest one, but it does harp on the fundamentals. For more videos like this, make sure that you like, you subscribe. Take a look at our website. We do offer a plethora of courses that will get you going in the development world. All right. So we'll see you in the next one. Take care.